So there has been a terrible attack in Sri Lanka this morning on Easter Sunday that has claimed the lives of 207 people so far, 450 injured, and the death toll is most likely going to rise. So, we all know the culprit behind this, right? We know this is Islamic terrorism, but still nobody has taken credit for it. Still, we're not told who the culprits are, even though I think at least 13 people so far have been apprehended. So they know who did it. I think even the president or somebody in Sri Lanka said that he didn't want to tell the culprits or let us know who the culprits were because he didn't want to inflame religious tensions. But it's really interesting to see the double standard when white supremacists shoot up Christchurch compared to when Islamic terrorists go and kill a bunch of people during Easter ceremony. They killed at least 36 foreigners, I think, so far, a few Americans, Dutch, and other people, but all those other people were innocent Sri Lankans that didn't do anything wrong, that didn't deserve to die, and were just collateral damage because these Islamic terrorists wanted to kill some foreigners. So, this is disgusting, and we need to, send our support to these people for sure. But if our governments really wanted to help these people, they would call out the threat directly instead of just calling it attacks like what they're doing now. Like everybody, they're just saying, "Oh, it's an attack on Christians, the attack, this and that." Nobody's saying that it was Islamic terrorism, but it's really interesting to see the way that Chrystia Freeland Trudeau respond to this tragedy compared to the Christchurch shooter, and how they were so adamant about calling out the true problem and saying what it really is, right? I'm going to read a part of an article that came out during the Christchurch shooter from Chrystia Freeland. Then I'll read the statement that Trudeau just recently released about this Sri Lankan tragedy, right? But you'll notice the difference in language and how they're much more willing to call out the threat of white supremacy, but they're never going to use the language of calling out, Islamic terrorism directly. They're going to say it's religious extremism, at the very most. I think we've seen a couple articles say that it was religious extremism, but any idiot, anybody with a brain could tell you that it was Islamic terrorism. But this is from a couple months ago, or about a month ago, and when she was speaking to the UN, she said, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, incels, nativists, and radical anti-globalists who resort to violent acts are a threat to the stability of my country and countries around the world, Freeland said. So it'd be great if she said this after almost 200 people were killed in Sri Lanka, but it's not. That's not the real threat to these people. The real threat is white supremacy. That's the worldwide threat. That is killing all the people in Sri Lanka and all these other countries that ISIS fighters are now returning to. A lot of this violence has been increasing after the Islamic State fell in Syria, and a lot of these people are returning to these countries where they shouldn't be allowed to return. But we're opening our doors and letting them in, no problem, in Canada. And nothing's going to happen, right? There's going to be no problems. They're going to be valuable assets to converting other extremists, according to Justin Trudeau. But she goes on, these attacks need to be at the top of the global agenda during discussions on confronting global terrorism. And when such attacks do occur, the international community must not be afraid to condemn them specifically as racist acts of terrorism. So, we all need to come together as a community, a global community, international community, and call it out for what it is. But for this, no, it's religious extremism. Let's not say it's anything to do with Islam. We cannot hide behind euphemisms that distract from the truth, she said. In fact, doing so puts our citizens, especially those from religious minorities and radicalized or racialized communities, in greater danger. So if she understands that not naming the threat, like she says just here, puts these people in more danger, so why isn't she calling out the Islamic terrorism today, right? Because this is her statement today, right? Canada extends its condolences to the families and loved ones of those killed in today's attacks on churches and hotels in Sri Lanka, and we wish a swift recovery to those injured. To target people at prayer on Easter is despicable. We condemn these cowardly acts. So, no mention of Islamic terrorism, no mention or anything, but she's going to call out incels and the white supremacist threat, etc., right? But then she goes on, and like I said, she understands that not calling out the actual threat is not helping people. So she doesn't give a shit about all these innocent people in Sri Lanka that died, or the U.S. citizens and the Dutch and the U.K. citizens that also died. In a wake of the attacks of terrorism carried out by Muslims, Western countries often call upon Muslim countries and Muslim leaders to condemn those attacks in the name of their people and their faith, she said. So this is not true. Can you guys find me one example of a politician calling out Muslim countries right now to call out this attack, this Islamic terrorist attack? No, you're not going to find a single one. So this is just blatant lying. It should follow that as a foreign minister of a majority white, majority Christian country, what do you mean? White doesn't exist. We were never a majority Christian country. What are you talking about? We've always been diverse. White, what is really white anyways, I feel specific and personal responsibility to denounce white supremacist attacks in the same way, Freeland said. So this is what she did for that. And then this is Trudeau's comments today. I was shocked and saddened to hear of the devastating terrorist attacks in Sri Lanka, which have claimed the lives of more than 200 people and injured many hundreds more. On behalf of the Government of Canada and all Canadians, I offer my heartfelt condolences to all those who have lost loved ones and my hope for a full recovery to those injured. Canada strongly condemns these heinous attacks. So heinous attacks, not terrorists, not Islamic attacks, not Islamic terrorism, on hotels and Christians at prayer in churches. At least he called out the victims and said they were at least Christians, right? Places of worship are sacred, where all should feel safe and secure. No one should be targeted because of their faith. For millions of people around the world, Easter is a time to reflect on Jesus' message of compassion and kindness, a time to come together with friends and family. We cannot let attacks like these weaken the hope we share. So, diversity is our strength. We got to move on and press forward. We don't need to do anything like what we do after a white supremacist person does something. We don't need to change the laws. We can't let these attacks affect us. And we just got to move forward and move on and be stronger and keep importing these Muslims that do these attacks into our countries, right? Diversity is our strength. And then he goes on, we cannot let attacks like these weaken the hope we share. To the people of Sri Lanka and other communities affected by today's attacks, Canada stands with you. So what about to the Christians who are clearly, this is attack on the Christian faith during the holiest week. We will continue to work with you and other international partners to combat terrorism and violent extremism. So no mention of Islamic terrorism, violent Islamic extremism, and to promote greater peace and stability around the world. So, you see, to date, we have no reports of any Canadian citizens being affected due to this, right? But, you just see the reaction from politicians right now. Once again, they're, like you said, they're not calling out the real threat, but they will when it's somebody that they think is loosely connected to the right? And this guy was definitely a terrorist, and we need to call out white supremacy and the big threat that it faces. But, like I said, if they really wanted to help these people in Sri Lanka, they would call out Islamic terrorism. And these fighters are returning home. And why was there no security or anything like this at these mosques, or I mean at these churches, because 10 days before this, people were warning that there were going to be attacks specifically at churches and whatnot during Easter. So, you know, how come there isn't, well, why didn't they take these threats seriously? There has been a massive increase since 2017 in Sri Lanka with terrorist attacks. And like I said, since Syria has fallen, these people are coming back. And for us to think that they're just going to forget what they did, and it's going to be really hard to prosecute these people as well, because you need the RCMP to go into Syria and to document their crimes, which they're not going to fucking do. So we're letting these people back in, and it's only a matter of time before they do something. And I'm not trying to scare people, really, but you need to have a little bit of foresight at the very least. You can't let people like this back into your country who have probably murdered and massacred a bunch of innocent people in Syria. Like, have you seen what ISIS does to people? They line them all up on the ground and then they just shoot them. They do the horrible, horrible shit to people, innocent victims. And a lot of these people are like, oh, I only killed like 2 people or whatever. You're like, sure, you probably killed like 100. But we're going to go and reintegrate these people back in our society and hope for the best, which is very stupid. We're going to have a horrible tragedy like what was happened in Sri Lanka. And these things happen all the time in countries like this, right? But it got more coverage because it was during Easter and probably because it killed some foreigners, right? But this type of stuff happens all the time. And this is an example of diversity. And, a lot of these countries are very diverse and have, a large percentage of Islamic extremist, Islamist Muslims in their country. And this is the results of that. I'm not saying every Muslim person is bad and is going to, do these same things specifically, but you may as well just be safe than sorry, and just, cut off all immigration from these countries into your country to begin with. I'm not saying they're all bad. Many are great people and stuff, but the risk is just too high. It's just too high. And we're not going to see the same reaction during our holy holidays where people get butchered and massacred. We're not going to see the same reaction that other people, what if people during Ramadan and stuff were killed? There would be a much larger, like, oh my God, how could you do this? Instead of, we're going to talk about this for 10 fucking years and we're going to change all these laws and whatnot. But for this, stay strong, move on, just put up your a flag of the Sri Lankan flag for a day and forget about it. It's not a big deal. Christians aren't being persecuted all over the world and being killed and run out of their countries and stuff by extremists. They're not the ones being targeted. The real victims are Muslims, and you got to bring all of them into your country because they have nowhere else to go. As opposed to, no, leave the Christians in these, leave the Christian minorities in these Muslim countries often where they're being killed or persecuted. They don't really need asylum. But these Muslims that have a majority, let's bring them in. Let's bring it. This is a better idea. But once again, it's sad what happened to these people, and I hope the casualty count does not increase. But use this as an example of what we are going to experience more in the future. Why wouldn't we experience this? What has Sri Lanka done to Muslims? You know what I mean? Like, how did they destroy their countries or anything like that? No, they just do this because they're not Muslim, they're different, or they're Christians and whatnot. But if you like my content, subscribe and have a good day. Take it easy, guys.